Now, towards the end of the first chapter, Patanjali comes to explain the concept of Samapatti. Samapatti means falling deeper into something, engrossing yourself in something, immersing yourself more fully and completely in something. And Patanjali explained this in 4 levels: Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, and Nirvichara. And there are gradual states of refinement where you come closer to see underneath the surface layer of things. And you come to see deeper into the kind of subtle nature of Prakrti. And as Prakrti becomes more transparent, then eventually what you're left with is the Seer, which is kind of isolated into its own essence. So here Patanjali says, and here Patanjali says, Paramanu Paramahatvantosya Vashikaraha. Vashikaraha means a kind of special type of Vashikara Samgna Vairagyam, he says in a previous sutra. How there is a higher type of knowledge. And this deeper knowledge, Patanjali says, it is being can be realized from the most subtle and the minute particle of the universe into the gross particle of the universe. So whatever you put your mind to, do it fully and completely. Because Paramanu, on a subatomic level, until a Paramahatva, to a great cosmic level, your focus can inquire into the nature of things. Okay? So this is what Samapatti is, so going deeper into. Now, when we inquire into knowledge, there's a problem that our mind may have some defaults, our instrument of perception may have some default, or the very subject we study may have some default. And Patanjali's argument of Samapatti, of finding greater clarity and stillness in the mind, he says, is when the mind is able to become like a crystal. He says, Kshina Vrittir, when the vrittis of the mind has become more translucent, or where they have minimized a little, they've eased down. And Abhijata Syeva, and when the mind has become like a crystal, and we are able to distinguish between knowledge, the knower, and the known, and see how they are 3 separate identities and qualities, and all these 3 things affect the mind, but sometimes we take it as one, then we are able to go deeper and to center the mind and still the mind into a greater clarity of cognition. So the first step of Samapatti is being able to see things more clearly, allowing the mind to become like a crystal in itself, translucent and unaffected, not taking on the color of what it comes into the presence of. The second state is called Savitarka Samapatti, and then Tatra Shabda Artha Gnana Vikalpai Samkirna Savitarka Samapatti, says Patanjali. So it's when the mind is able to make a distinction between word, meaning, and the concept we have about it. Patanjali says that normally word, meaning, and the idea we give to it comes as a whole. We are unable to separate it into 3 aspects. That there's a suchness of the word, there's a suchness of the meaning we give to it, and there's a suchness of the actual concept we have about it. Yet when we're able to see this clearly as 3 separate identities that affect the mind, then we're going deeper into Savitarka Samapatti. Now the third step of Nirvitarka Samapatti is when the Smrti Parishuddha is when our memory is unaffected by all our previous assumptions, but all the instant things that flashes and we think this is what it is. But Smrti Parishuddha Svarupa Shunyeva Artamata Nirbhasa. Now the Nirvitarka Samapatti is when we are purified of our previous memories, Smrti Parishuddha. And it says Svarupa Shunya, when we have no longer any concepts about the word and the ideas and the form of things, but when we see things clearly as they are, in its own form, that is called nirvitarka. So it's beyond the surface layer of things, getting into the suchness of things, and being able to discriminate between these three concepts of word, meaning, and the idea we give to it. When we can first see that, and then come deeper into the actual identity of the word or the whatever we are, the object we are inquiring into, then we eventually come into a realization of what potentially called nirvitarka samapatti.
And what is
so we see that samapatti has to do with moving from the gross to the subtle. It's allowing the mind to become like a transparent crystal, unaffected by its own default, but the mind becomes clear in itself, and it can relate to the suchness of things. It can make a distinction between word, meaning, and the idea we give to things. And when the mind becomes purified by its own concept, ideas, and generalizations, and can see things as they are in its own purity of form, as we go deeper into this, then according to Patanjali, we are in nirvitarka samapatti. After Patanjali explains savitarka or nirvitarka, he says that in the same way, when it comes to savichara or nirvichara, which is two deeper stages of samapatti, that and in the same way, these are equally subtle as savitarka and nirvitarka, that you relate to the objects of things, but savichara is related to the energetic quality of things on a more subtle level, and it's not so easily graspable through the mind. But as you are able to hold your concentration and survey and understand the subtlety and suchness of things, a centeredness of mind is being brought about, and a dissolvement of the rough, rigid patterns of Prakriti. And the Prakriti becomes more translucent, and then it's easier to discriminate between Purusha and Prakriti. Patanjali's statement is that the more you inquire into the subtlety of things, and the more you understand the fluctuations of your own mind, the fluctuations of everything in the matter around us, you may understand it from a gross level to a microscopic level. But the more you inquire into it, and the deeper you come into the subtlety of things, then you see that it has its own form in the most minute, subtle level. And it has the suchness in that minute essence. And everything within Prakriti, from the gross to the most subtle, has its own form. What is different to that form is another reality, and that's what Patanjali tries to convey to us, of the Seer, which is different to all the subtle thing that it relates to. So Patanjali is like, he gives us a support from within. And that support is the Seer. Without that, there is no cognition, there is no consciousness. You may perceive things from the most gross to the inmost subtle and minuteness and suchness of things. It says, Ta eva Sabija Samadhi. All these inquiries into the subtlety of things is samadhi, concentration, focus, centeredness of mind, with a support, with a seed. You relate to something. You hold your focus on something that helps you bring about stability of the mind. Without that focus, the mind does not become aware of itself. And that is the purpose of Prakriti, to make the mind become aware of itself, so it can see who is the indweller, the resider within the mind. But the importance of developing samapatti, developing greater focus of mind, is in order to realize that beyond the suchness and the most minuteness of things, there is no magic being found. There is just more and more subtleties. But what is there observing the subtlety is this Purusha. So Patanjali says, Nirvichara Vaisharadye Atma Prasadaha. When you are able to center your mind in the most minute concentration of the subtlety of nature, eventually there may be a spontaneous joy that arises just due to the fact that the inmost nature within you is not part of that which you study. Whatever you study may affect the mind and help to center and focus the mind, but there's something within you that is always different to that. So as we inquire into the subtlety of things, and as we become more centered in the subtlety of things, we may also become aware that there is a harmony of essence that is uniting it all together. And this is what Patanjali means when it says, if you are centered in that high state, there is spontaneous joy that arises, but there's a freedom of the self that is being realized. And he says, Ritambara Tatra Pragna, the wisdom that overflows from that source is limitless. That wisdom is a source of infinite greatness when it's not relating to the external stuff, not relating to the subtleties within your mind, but it's the very essence that brings about clarity and focus in the mind. Because Patanjali says it is beyond what you have thought, heard, or imagined things to be. He says, Shrutanumana prajnabhyam anya vishaya vishesha tattvat. It's a different suchness. Because he says, Shrutanumana prajnabhyam anya vishaya vishesha tattvat. It's a different suchness. It is not a concept. It is not an idea. It is not a word. It is not a thought. It has a different gravity. And that is the support of the mind, says Patanjali. And then of course that Tadjas Anya Samskara Pratibandhi. When we are able to be in that state, or realize that there's something within us that is untouched and unaffected by everything we see, which is called the seen. There's a seer unaffected by the seen. And as that becomes more prominent within us, as that becomes more grounded and stable in its own essence, then we start to experience a different support in our mind. And according to Patanjali, Tasyapi Nirode Sarva Nirodan Nirbija Samadhi. And if we are centered in that restraint of all the fluctuations of the mind and find our support in an inmost luminosity of wisdom, then that becomes our support. Then our karmas subside. Then our flaws and failures are neutralized and pacified due to the greatness of that oneness that holds us together, that gives us support, that is the root of our existence.